Hello and welcome to History Insight. In today's episode, we will be discussing the incredible story of Yasuke, a black slave who rose to the rank of samurai in 16th century Japan. But before we dive into Yasuke's story, let's first talk a little bit about the samurai. The samurai were a class of warrior in feudal Japan who followed a strict code of honor known as Bushido, or the Way of the Warrior. This code emphasized loyalty, self-discipline, and a willingness to die for one's lord. The samurai were highly skilled in the art of sword fighting and were expected to be master strategists on the battlefield. They were also expected to be well-educated and to possess a deep understanding of literature, poetry, and the arts. The samurai were an important part of Japanese society for centuries, and their influence can still be seen today in Japanese culture and traditions. Many people around the world are drawn to the romanticized image of the samurai with their elegant swords, elaborate armor, and strict code of conduct. But while the samurai may seem like a distant and exotic part of history, they were also very much a product of their time. They lived in a society that was heavily divided by class, with the samurai at the top and the common people at the bottom. They were also part of a culture that was deeply militaristic and that valued strength and bravery above all else. Now, on to Yasuke's story. Yasuke was born in the late 1500s in Portuguese Mozambique, and at some point in his youth, he was captured and sold into slavery. It is not clear how he ended up in Japan, but it is believed that he may have arrived with a group of Portuguese traders or missionaries. There are several theories about Yasuke's early life and background. According to one theory, he was from the Makua people of Mozambique. Another theory suggests that he was from the Yo people, or from the more inland area of Mozambique. There are also claims that Yasuke was a Dinka from South Sudan, or that he was from Ethiopia. One of the more widely accepted theories is that Yasuke was from Ethiopia. Like Yasuke, Ethiopians who were not Jewish, Abed Israel, Christian, or Muslim were often sold into slavery and called kafir by the Portuguese. They were well-built and skilled soldiers. According to this theory, his original name might be the Amharic name Yasuke, or the Portuguese name Isaac, derived from Isaac. Yasuke was also used as a surname in Ethiopia. When Yasuke arrived in Japan in 1579, he was in the service of the Italian Jesuit missionary Alessandro Valignano, who had been appointed the visitor inspector of the Jesuit missions in the Indies, which at that time meant East Africa, South, Southeast, and East Asia. Yasuke accompanied Valignano when the latter came to the capital area in March 1581, and his appearance caused much interest with the local people. When Yasuke was presented to Oda Nobunaga, the Japanese daimyo thought that his skin must have been colored with black ink. Nobunaga had him stripped from the waist up and made him scrub his skin. These events are recorded in a 1581 letter of the Jesuit Louis Frois to Lorenzo Mexia, and in the 1582 annual report of the Jesuit mission in Japan, also by Frois. These were published in Cartas que os Padres e Irmãos de la Companhia de Jesus Escreveram dos Reinos de Japão e China Hugh, 1598, normally known simply as Cartas. When Nobunaga realized that the African skin was indeed black, he took an interest in him. The Lord Nobunaga Chronicle corroborates Frois' account. It describes the meeting thus: on the 23rd of the second month, a black page, Kuro Bozu, came from the Christian countries. The man was described as robust, black as a bull, and of fine character. Nobunaga's nephew gave him a sum of money at this first meeting. It is likely that Yasuke could speak or was taught Japanese, perhaps due to Valignano's efforts to ensure his missionaries adapted well to the local culture. Nobunaga enjoyed talking with him. There is no indication that Nobunaga spoke Portuguese, and it is unlikely that Yasuke would have been able to communicate in classical Chinese, the East Asian lingua franca of the time. He was perhaps the only non-Japanese retainer that Nobunaga had in his service, which could explain Nobunaga's interest in him. Yasuke was mentioned in a variant text of the Shinshoki owned by Sankakaku Bunko, the archives of the Mata clan. According to this, the black man named Yasuke was given his own residence and a short ceremonial katana by Nobunaga. Nobunaga also assigned him the duty of weapon bearer. Yasuke fought alongside Nobunaga in numerous battles and was even present at the Battle of Tadaraagawa in 1582, where Nobunaga was able to decisively defeat his rivals and become one of the most powerful men in Japan. After Nobunaga's death in 1582, Yasuke continued to serve under Nobunaga's successors, Toyotomi Hideyoshi and Tokugawa Ieyasu. He even took part in the siege of Odawara in 1590, which was a major turning point in Japanese history and marked the beginning of the Edo period. Despite his successes on the battlefield, Yasuke's status as a foreign slave made him a controversial figure in Japan. He faced discrimination and hostility from some quarters, and it is believed that he was eventually freed and returned to Africa in the late 1590s. It is not clear what happened to Yasuke after he returned to Africa. But his legacy lived on in Japan. He became a symbol of the open-mindedness and cultural exchange that characterized the late Sengoku period, and his story has been passed down through the generations. In recent years, there has been renewed interest in Yasuke's story, and he has been the subject of several books, movies, and television shows. In 2019, a Netflix anime series called Yasuke was released, which tells the story of Yasuke's rise to power in feudal Japan. The series is based on historical events but also includes fictional elements and is not meant to be a completely accurate portrayal of Yasuke's life. But Yasuke's story is not just one of inspiration and triumph. It is also a reminder of the horrors of slavery and the importance of fighting for justice and equality. Yasuke may have been a samurai, but he was also a man who was forced into bondage and treated as a commodity. His story is a testament to the resilience and strength of the human spirit. Slavery has a long and sordid history, and it continues to be a major issue in the world today. It is estimated that there are currently 40.3 million people living in slavery around the world, with women and children being the most vulnerable. Slavery has taken many forms throughout history, from ancient empires where slaves were used as labor to modern-day human trafficking, which involves the exploitation of people for profit. The transatlantic slave trade, which brought millions of Africans to the Americas, is perhaps the most well-known example of slavery in modern times. The transatlantic slave trade was a massive and brutal enterprise that spanned over 3 centuries. It was fueled by the demand for cheap labor in the New World and the profit-hungry attitudes of European merchants and colonial powers. The slaves who were brought to the Americas were subjected to unimaginable horrors. They were packed into cramped and unsanitary ships for the journey across the Atlantic, and many of them died from disease, starvation, or abuse. Those who survived the journey were often sold at auction and treated as property, subjected to brutal treatment and forced to work long hours in harsh conditions. It is estimated that between 10 and 12 million Africans were brought to the Americas as slaves, and the impact of this mass migration can still be felt today in the cultures and societies of the Americas. Slavery had a profound and lasting impact on the African diaspora, and it continues to be a source of pain and trauma for many people of African descent. So, as we remember Yasuke and his incredible journey from slave to samurai, let's also take a moment to reflect on the ongoing fight against slavery and what we can do to help. Despite the limited information that is available about Yasuke, his story is still an inspiring one. He was able to overcome the challenges of being a foreigner in a foreign land and rise to a position of power and influence. He proved that anyone, regardless of their background or circumstances, can achieve great things if they are willing to work hard and persevere. Thank you for watching today's episode of History Insight. We hope you have learned something new about Yasuke and the samurai. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel for more interesting historical stories. Until next time, goodbye.